my wife's memorial service, while I was standing at the pulpit trying to hold myself together long enough to say a few words about the woman I had loved for 38 years, my son's wife leaned over to him in the third pew and whispered something that made him almost smile. Almost. I saw it from up there. A widower at a podium sees everything and understands nothing for a while. Because grief does something strange to your perception. It sharpens the wrong things. I noticed the hem of her dress. I noticed the way she held her phone face down on her thigh like she was waiting for a text message that mattered more than this room. I noticed that almost smile on my son's face. I didn't know what she had said to him. Not yet. Before I tell you what I found out and what I did about it, I need you to drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. Because what I am about to share, I need to know people heard it. My wife's name was Lorraine. She was 64 years old, and she spent the last 31 of those years as a school librarian in Charlotte, North Carolina. She was the kind of woman who remembered every child's name. She ordered books specifically for kids she thought needed them. She drove to the dollar store on her own dime and bought bookmarks to give away at the end of each school year. When she retired, they named a reading corner after her. There was a small ceremony. They gave her a plaque, and she cried harder than the children. She died of pancreatic cancer. We had 8 months from diagnosis to the morning she stopped breathing. I was holding her hand. My name is Eugene Holt. I'm 61 years old. I spent 32 years as a licensed contractor and then 5 more running my own construction company before I sold it. I am not a wealthy man by the standards my daughter-in-law seemed to carry in her head like a measuring tape for other people's worth. But I am not poor either. Lorraine and I had been careful. We had been deliberate. We had made choices that looked like sacrifice from the outside and felt like love from the inside. My son Kendall is 34. He married Brianna 6 years ago. I tried for 6 years to find things to like about her. I found a few. She was organized. She kept a clean house. She had a talent for presentation. The way she arranged a table. The way she dressed. The way she smiled at people she wanted something from. That smile. I had cataloged it over 6 years. The Brianna wants something smile had a specific shape. The corners went up a 1/4 inch too high. The day of the memorial, she was wearing a dress the color of a new copper penny. Burnt orange. Lorraine's sisters were in black. Her colleagues from the school were in black. The pastor was in black. Brianna was in burnt orange with gold earrings that caught the light every time she moved her head. I noticed. Everyone noticed. No one said anything because grief steals your tongue and you use the breath you have left for the important words. After the service. After the burial at Forest Hill Cemetery. After the reception at our church's fellowship hall where 36 people brought casseroles and pound cakes and sat with me in that heavy damp grief that fills a room after a loss. After all of that, I drove home. My driveway had a U-Haul in it. Not a small one. A 26-foot truck parked with its back end hanging over the sidewalk. Back doors open. A loading ramp dropped down onto my lawn. The rain had planted knockout roses along that side of the yard. The ram crushed 2 of them flat. I sat in my truck for a full minute before I got out. The front door of the house I'd built, and I mean that literally. I drew the plans. I pulled the permits. I swung the hammer on weekends for 2 years, was standing open. I could hear Brianna's voice from the driveway. She was giving instructions to someone. I walked in. The living room looked like a storage unit mid-reorganization. Brianna's things were everywhere. Designer luggage I had never seen before. Stacked in a tower by the staircase, boxes labeled in her handwriting, master closet, bathroom vanity, kitchen, my stuff. That last one, my stuff, in my kitchen. Kendall was carrying a box in from the truck. He saw me and his whole face did something complicated. The shame didn't win. It never wins with Kendall when Brianna is in the room. Dad. He set the box down. We didn't want you to be rattling around in this big house by yourself. Brianna emerged from the hallway. She was still in the copper dress. She had taken off her heels and was walking barefoot on Lorraine's hardwood floors with a glass of my sweet tea in her hand. It just makes sense, she said. The Brianna wants something smile was at full height. This house is too much for one person, and Kendall and I have been wanting to make a change anyway. This works for everyone. I noticed she did not say it works for you. I looked at my son. He looked at the wall. That's very thoughtful, I said. My voice came out steady. I don't entirely know how. Let me go rest for a minute. It's been a long day. Of course, Brianna said. She touched my arm as I passed. A performance of tenderness, so thin I could see through it. I went to my bedroom. Close the door. I sat on the edge of the bed. Our bed, Lorraine's and mine, with her pillow still dented from the last morning she woke up in it. And I breathed. I breathed until the thing I wanted to do with my hands became something I could set aside. Then I opened the nightstand drawer and looked at the small voice-activated recorder I had put there 3 days earlier. Let me back up. Lorraine had been in the hospital for the last 9 days of her life. During that time, Kendall and Brianna visited twice. 2 times in 9 days. The second visit was the day before Lorraine passed. Brianna spent most of it on her phone in the hallway. When she came into the room, she held Lorraine's hand for about 40 seconds and then said she needed some air. On the drive home from the hospital that day, I stopped at an electronics store. I don't know exactly what I was thinking. I just knew something in my gut had tilted and I wanted to be ready for whatever came after the tilt. I bought 4 small voice-activated recorders. I placed them in rooms I thought mattered. I bought a system of wireless cameras that fed to an app on my phone, the same brand I had used on job sites for years. I installed them in less than 2 hours. I put one behind the decorative panel above the refrigerator, one inside the bookcase in the living room, angled, one in the corner of the garage. I told no one. I went back to the hospital and held my wife's hand until she stopped breathing. So there I was, sitting on the edge of our bed. On the day we buried her, listening to the voice recorder catch the sound of boxes being moved in my hallway. I opened the app on my phone. The living room camera showed Brianna directing Kendall with the kind of efficiency usually reserved for military operations. I set the phone face down and closed my eyes. I am a man who has spent 30 years reading blueprints. I understand that a structure reveals its weakness under load. I had been watching my son carry a load he wasn't built for. The question was whether he knew it. That night, after I had shuffled to the kitchen and eaten some of the casserole someone had left, I want to say it was Mrs. Patterson from the church. She always makes the chicken one with the crushed crackers on top. I made a point of passing through the living room before I went back to bed. Brianna and Kendall were sitting at Lorraine's dining room table, the table where Lorraine had graded papers on Sunday evenings and made grocery lists and helped Kendall with college applications. Brianna had a legal pad out. She was writing things down in columns. There's a property manager in Ballantyne my friend used, she was saying. We could list it furnished. Furnished rentals go fast in this market. Pull in 3, maybe $3,500 a month easy. Kendall said something I couldn't hear. We're not selling yet, Brianna said. Not until we know what the estate looks like. Then we decide. I stood in the shadow of the hallway and breathed. Then I shuffled into the light and said, I forgot my water and got a glass from the sink. Brianna covered the legal pad with her arm like a student hiding a test. Can I get you anything, Dad? She said. Same smile. I'm all right, I said. I looked at Kendall. He looked at his hands. Good night. I went upstairs. I checked the recording. It was better than I expected. Audio was clean. In the 20 minutes before I came into the kitchen, Brianna had laid it out as plainly as an invoice. She had called her sister. The call had recorded clearly. The house alone is worth close to $700,000, she said. And he's got the business sale money sitting somewhere because he definitely didn't spend it. Kendall says he doesn't talk about it, but it has to be somewhere. We just need to be in position when it moves. Her sister said something. I know he's grieving, Brianna said. That's the point. This is the window. You don't think I know that? I sat very still in my dark bedroom and listened to my daughter-in-law calculate the value of my wife's death. There's a moment, I don't know how to describe it exactly, where something cold settles over the top of your grief and you stop being only sad. The sadness is still there. It doesn't go anywhere. But something else comes in alongside it, something that thinks clearly and plans carefully and does not make noise. I had that moment that night. I did not confront them. I did not call a lawyer. I did not call Kendall into the room and play him the recording. I made a decision that felt unusual to me because I am a direct man by nature. I decided to wait. I decided to become, in their eyes, exactly what they already assumed I was. A 61-year-old man overwhelmed by loss, a man who needed to be guided, a man who didn't fully understand what was happening around him. It is a particular kind of discipline, pretending to be less than you are. I don't recommend it unless the stakes are high enough. Mine were. The next 2 weeks moved in a rhythm I permitted. Brianna redecorated the downstairs guest bathroom without asking. She threw away Lorraine's reading chair because it was, in her words, taking up space in the den that could be used better. Kendall helped her carry it to the curb. I watched from the kitchen window. I didn't go out. I moved quietly through the house in the evenings. I made myself seem confused about things I understood completely. I called the smart TV the computer box and asked Brianna how to turn it on when I had installed it myself 5 years ago. She explained it slowly, in that voice people use for elderly relatives and very small children. I thanked her and shuffled off. She stopped being careful in front of me. That was what I was waiting for. 3 weeks after Lorraine's memorial, a man came to the house on a Tuesday morning. I was sitting in the living room with a cup of coffee, apparently absorbed in a program about fishing. Brianna brought him in without mentioning he was coming. She introduced him as a friend who worked in estate planning. He was not an estate planner. He had a real estate license and a briefcase that was too new to have been used much. I shook his hand. I asked him if he liked fishing. He said sure. I nodded and turned back to the television. They went to the dining room. I turned the TV volume down 2 notches. Full renovation scope would probably run you $120–130, he said. Kitchens and baths are the money, but even selling as is, given the lot size and the location, you'd clear $650 minimum, probably closer to $7. What about timing? Brianna said. Spring is always better, but honestly, this market, I'd list at any time. You want buyers? This neighborhood sells itself. The issue, Brianna said, is making sure all the paperwork is organized. His name is on everything and he gets. She paused, confused. We're looking at getting him some help, possibly a memory care situation, at least part-time. I set my coffee cup down very carefully. Memory care. I was 61 years old. I ran 4 miles every morning before Lorraine got sick, and I was back to running 3. I read 2 newspapers. I could quote the load-bearing specifications for every major project I had built in the last 20 years without looking at a file. But I had asked Brianna how to use the television. So I sat very still and listened to her describe me as a man slipping away, and I built the next several moves in my head like I was reading a set of structural drawings, tracing the lines from foundation to roof. That afternoon, I called my attorney. His name is Thaddeus Okafor, and I have worked with him for 19 years. I did not call from the house phone. I drove to the Harris Teeter 3 miles away and called from the parking lot. They're going to bring me something to sign, I told him. Probably a power of attorney, maybe a healthcare proxy. I need everything in order before they do. He was quiet for a moment. How long have they been in the house? 3 weeks. You want me to make a call to have them removed? Not yet, I said. I need a little more time. What I needed was not more time exactly. What I needed was Iris. Iris is 26 years old. She is the daughter of my wife's youngest sister, which makes her Lorraine's niece, and therefore my niece by love, if not by blood. She grew up 3 hours from Charlotte in Wilmington, and she had a relationship with Lorraine that I can only describe as a second motherhold. Lorraine paid for Iris's LSAT prep courses. She flew down to celebrate when Iris got her acceptance letter. She cried at Iris's law school graduation, the same way she cried at that library ceremony, harder than anyone else in the room. Iris passed the North Carolina bar exam on her first attempt 18 months ago. She is currently a junior associate at a firm in Raleigh that handles estate litigation. I had called Iris the week before the memorial. I told her I needed her to be involved. I told her I would explain when the time was right. She asked me one question. Is she going to try to contest the will? I said I didn't know what Brianna was going to try. I knew what Lorraine had already done. Lorraine had updated her will 8 months ago, 2 weeks after the diagnosis. She did it herself, with Thaddeus, without telling me the specifics. She told me she was taking care of things and I should let her. I let her. When you are watching someone you love face something that large, you give them the things they ask for without conditions. She asked to handle this one herself. I said okay. I did not know the contents of the will, but I knew Lorraine. I knew how she thought. I knew who she had been watching. On the Tuesday night after the man with the new briefcase visited, Brianna came into the living room and sat down across from me. She had a folder. She put it on the coffee table between us. "Dad, we need to talk about some paperwork," she said. Her voice was the careful, gentle voice. "It's just to make sure you're protected, so that Kendall and I can handle things for you if you ever need us to." I looked at the folder. What kind of things? Banking. The house. Just so there are no complications. She opened the folder and slid a document toward me. I could read the header from where I sat. Durable power of attorney. Lorraine always handled the paperwork, I said. I let my voice sound uncertain. I know, and that's why we want to help. So, nothing falls through the cracks. I picked up the document. I turned it over in my hands slowly. I looked at the signature line. I looked up at Brianna. "Where does Kendall want me to sign?" She called him in from the kitchen. He came and sat on the arm of the couch. He didn't look at me directly. "Right there," Brianna said, pointing. She held a pen out to me. I took the pen. I held it over the line. My hand was perfectly steady, but I let it drift slightly, the way a man unsure of his grip might. Then I put the pen down. "I'd like to have Thaddeus look at it first," I said. "He handled everything for us for years. I'd just feel better." Brianna's expression shifted, just a fraction. "Of course," she said. "That makes sense. There's no rush." There was a rush. I had heard it in her voice on the phone with her sister. I handed the folder back to her. "I appreciate you both thinking of me," I said. Kendall finally looked at me. I held his gaze for 3 full seconds. He looked away first. I went upstairs. I texted Thaddeus, "Ready when you are." Scheduled a reading for 2 weeks out. He replied in 4 minutes, "I'll call Iris." The morning of the will reading, I was up before 5. I dressed in the dark in my good charcoal suit, the one I had bought for Lorraine's retirement party. The one she said made me look like I still ran things. I put on a white shirt and a tie she had given me for my 58th birthday. It was dark blue with a small geometric pattern. She had said it was distinguished. I nodded it 3 times before I got it right. I went downstairs. Brianna and Kendall were already awake. They were dressed in what I can only describe as expectant clothing. Brianna in a white blazer and silk blouse. Kendall in a sport coat I hadn't seen before. They had coffee. They seemed almost cheerful. The atmosphere in the kitchen had the particular compressed energy of people who believe they are about to receive something. "Morning, Dad," Kendall said. "Morning. Big day," Brianna said. She tried to make it sound sympathetic. These things are always hard, but it's good to have clarity. "Yes," I said. "It is." I poured my own coffee. I stood at the counter and drank it, looking out at the backyard. Lorraine's garden. The knockout roses she had planted in 2 long rows along the fence. They were just starting to come back after winter. We drove separately. Thaddeus's office is in a building downtown that I helped renovate 12 years ago. I know every staircase in it. I walked in through the lobby and rode the elevator to the 4th floor. Thaddeus's receptionist nodded at me. "They're in the conference room," she said. "There's one more party to arrive." Brianna and Kendall were already seated on one side of the long table. Brianna had her folder in front of her. She had brought her own notes. I almost found it impressive. I sat at the head of the table. Brianna looked at the empty chair across from her. "Who else is coming?" "We're waiting on one more," Thaddeus said. He checked his watch. 40 seconds later, the door opened. Iris walked in. I had not seen her since the funeral. She had grown her hair out. She was wearing a charcoal blazer that matched mine almost exactly, which felt intentional or like something Lorraine would have arranged if she could have. She carried a leather portfolio and she walked like someone who had been preparing for this specific morning for months. Because she had, she sat directly across from Brianna without speaking. Brianna stared at her. I watched recognition move across her face in stages. She had met Iris once at a family cookout 4 years ago. Briefly. "Why is she here?" Brianna said. She kept her voice controlled. "Ms. Mesvern." She kept her voice controlled. "Ms. Mesver, Iris Carter is a named party in this proceeding," Thaddeus said. "She is also serving as co-counsel for the estate at Mr. Holt's request." Co-counsel. Brianna set her folder down. "She's family." "She is," I said. "That's why I trust her." Kendall was watching Iris with an expression I couldn't fully read, something between confusion and the beginning of understanding, something that had been explained to him in a language he was only now learning to translate. Thaddeus opened the will. "I'll begin with the inventory," he said. I watched Brianna's posture change when he read the first number. The house, appraised at $680,000. Her chin came up slightly. The savings and investment accounts, managed jointly, totaling approximately $400,000. Her eyes went briefly to Kendall. The proceeds from the sale of the construction company held in a separate account totaling $620,000. Brianna pressed her lips together in something that was almost a smile. She was doing arithmetic. I could see it. She was in the middle of dividing a number that was never going to be hers. Then Thaddeus turned the page and said, "I will now read the disposition of assets." Brianna put both hands flat on the table. "To my husband, Eugene Holt, I leave full ownership and life estate rights to the property at." Thaddeus read our address in perpetuity, "with sole authority over all decisions regarding the property for the duration of his life." Brianna nodded slowly. Okay. She could work with that. The financial accounts, savings, investments, and business sale proceeds are transferred in their entirety to the Lorraine Holt Family Trust, established October of last year. A trust. Brianna looked at Thaddeus. "Who are the beneficiaries?" Thaddeus looked at her over the tops of his glasses. "I was getting there." He turned to the next page. "The sole beneficiary of the Lorraine Holt Family Trust is Iris Marie Carter." The room went absolutely quiet. Iris did not smile. She looked at the table. Kendall made a sound I had not heard from him since he was a child. A small, airless sound. He turned and looked at me, and for a moment he was 8 years old, and I was telling him something that didn't make sense yet but would. Brianna stood up. She didn't overturn her chair. She stood up with a terrible, rigid control and pointed at Iris. "She's not a Holt," she said. Her voice was flat. "She's not even a direct descendant. She's a niece by marriage. She has no legal claim. She was named as beneficiary by the legal owner of the assets," Thaddeus said. "Mrs. Medias. Holt had full legal capacity at the time the will was executed, witnessed by 2 attorneys and a notary. There is no valid basis for a challenge." "On what grounds did Lorraine even know her well enough to—" Brianna stopped herself. "They corresponded weekly," I said. Lorraine paid for her LSAT prep. Lorraine was at her graduation. Lorraine knew her better than most people know their own children. The last part landed where I intended it to land. Kendall put his hand over his face. "This is fraud," Brianna said. She turned to me. "You manipulated a dying woman. You turned her against her own son to funnel assets to someone outside the immediate family. I will contest this. I will hire someone who—" "You'll need money for that," I said. I said it quietly. "Do you have any?" She stared at me. "Because I spoke to your brother last week," I said. "He mentioned you've been carrying some significant credit card balances, and that the car you're driving is financed at an interest rate that suggests some past credit difficulties." This was true. I had not gone looking for it. Her brother had been on a job site I consulted on last fall, and we had talked, the way men talk when they are standing around waiting for concrete to set. He was worried about her. I had filed it away and forgotten it until I needed it. Brianna's jaw tightened. That's none of your business. No, I agreed. It isn't. But contesting a will with the firm Thaddeus works with, on the grounds you're describing, with no evidence of undue influence in a beneficiary who has a 19-year documented relationship with the deceased, that's going to cost you, and you will lose. She looked at Kendall. Say something. Kendall was looking at his hands. Kendall. Her voice cracked slightly. The control was starting to go. Tell him this isn't right. Tell him this isn't right. Tell him we deserve. Don't, Kendall said. Just that one word, the first time I had heard him speak to her that way. It didn't sound like anger exactly. It sounded like exhaustion that had finally found its legs. Brianna looked at him like he had hit her. Thaddeus cleared his throat. There are 2 additional provisions. She turned back to him slowly. First, Mr. Holt serves as the sole trustee of the Lorraine Holt Family Trust until Miss Carter reaches the age of 30. He has full discretionary authority over distributions during that period. I watched Brianna understand what that meant. I controlled the money. For 4 years, I controlled every dollar Iris received from that trust, which meant I was not removable, which meant they needed me intact, present, and cooperative, which meant I was precisely as untouchable as I needed to be. Second, Thaddeus continued, any individual who attempts to interfere with Mr. Holt's rights to the family residence, including unauthorized habitation, harassment, financial coercion, or any effort to have Mr. Holt declared legally incapacitated without documented clinical cause, forfeits any residual interest in the estate, and may be subject to legal action for elder financial exploitation under North Carolina General Statute 108A 102. He put the document down. In plain language, Thaddeus said, looking at Brianna, if you pursue what you've been pursuing, you will lose what little you might have had, and you may be charged with a crime. Brianna sat back down. She sat down like someone whose legs had stopped working. She looked at the table. She looked at her folder with its careful notes and its columns of numbers that had meant something an hour ago and meant nothing now. Kendall looked at me. I had not played the recordings. I had not brought in the man with the new briefcase. I had not told Kendall what I had heard his wife say on the phone the night of Lorraine's memorial. I had chosen not to, because, and I had thought about this carefully in the way you think about things that cost you something, because I did not want my son in a room where he had no choice but to defend himself against his own voice. I wanted him to have a chance to stand up on his own if he had it in him. He had. One word. Don't. It wasn't much, but it was something. I'd like you both to be out of my house by Friday, I said. That gives you 4 days. I'll have your things boxed and on the porch if you haven't collected them by Saturday morning. Brianna opened her mouth. I'm not negotiating, I said. She closed it. They left the conference room separately. Kendall held the door for Brianna and then stood in the doorway for a moment after she went through. He turned and looked at me. Dad, he said. I know, I said. I should have. I know. He stood there another few seconds. There are things between a father and a son that don't fit into the shape of a conversation. They just stand in a doorway looking at each other until one of them moves. He moved. I sat at the conference table after they were gone, and Thaddeus poured me a glass of water and didn't say anything, which is one of the reasons I have worked with him for 19 years. Iris stayed. She sat across from me and set her portfolio aside and folded her hands. She's going to be all right, I said, before Iris could speak. I wasn't entirely sure it was true, but I believed Kendall was, somewhere underneath the choices he had made, the son I had tried to raise. He had a lot of work to do. So did I. So did most of us. Iris reached into her portfolio and set something on the table between us. It was an envelope. My name was written on the front in Lorraine's handwriting, that careful looping cursive she had used for 30 years in the margins of library books. She asked me to give it to you, Iris said, after. I picked it up. I didn't open it there. I pressed my thumb across her handwriting on the outside, just to feel the indentations her pen had made, just to know that the pressure of her hand was still there somehow, encoded in paper. She knew? I asked. About Brianna? She knew enough, Iris said. She worried about you. She said you would be fine, but she wanted to make sure you had what you needed. I nodded. We went back to the house together, Iris and I. I made coffee. She changed out of her blazer and helped me go through the rooms, assessing what would need to go. It took us most of the afternoon. Kendall came back that evening alone. He rang the doorbell, which I appreciated. I let him in. We sat in the kitchen. He didn't ask for money or forgiveness or any of the things I'd braced for. He asked if he could help me replant the roses that the U-Haul ramp had crushed. I said yes. We went out in the early evening light, and I showed him how to work a garden tool, which is something I should have shown him 20 years ago, and maybe the universe was giving us both a correction. We didn't talk much. We didn't need to. After he left, I sat on the back porch with a glass of sweet tea and the envelope Lorraine had left me. I opened it. Her handwriting inside was the same as always. Clear, unhurried, a little slanted to the right. She had written, "You were never as patient as you thought you were, Eugene, but you were always patient enough when it mattered. That's the important part. Take care of Iris. She takes care of everything else. I already know how this turns out. You're going to be fine. Plant some new roses, the yellow ones this time. I always wanted yellow. L." I sat with that letter until the porch light came on automatically and the fireflies started up in the garden. I've been asked before, in life, not in any dramatic way, just in the ordinary way people ask hard questions when they have run out of easy ones, whether I believe you can love someone and still fail them. I think the answer is yes. I think love without honesty is just affection with better lighting. I think we owe the people we love the truth about who they are, and sometimes we wait too long. And sometimes the cost of that waiting is paid by someone else. My son loved me enough to say one word in a conference room. That isn't nothing. I am not sure what it is yet. We are going to have to find out together. Iris comes for dinner on Sundays now. She brings her evidence binders and spreads them across Lorraine's dining room table, and I bring her coffee. And sometimes I sit across from her and read the paper, and it is quiet in the way that a house is quiet when it is being lived in by people who belong there. I planted yellow roses along the south fence last weekend. They haven't bloomed yet, but they're in the ground, which is the part that matters most. You can't rush what comes after. You just have to make sure the roots are right. If this story meant something to you, leave a comment and tell me where you're watching from. And if you believe that loyalty is earned, not assumed, you know what to do. I spent 32 years in construction. I know what a foundation looks like when it's been poured wrong. You can build on top of it for a while. It holds, it looks fine, nobody says anything. And then one day the load shifts and you see exactly where the cracks have been hiding all along. That's what happened with Brianna. The load shifted the day Lorraine died and every crack showed at once. I don't say that with satisfaction. I want to be honest about that. Because it would be easy to frame this as a win, as some kind of score settled, and it wasn't. Watching my son sit in that conference room, unable to look at me while his wife demanded what she believed she was owed, that wasn't a victory. That was one of the hardest rooms I've ever sat in, and I've sat in some hard ones. What I learned, and what I think is worth saying plainly, is that greed doesn't appear out of nowhere. It grows in the space where honesty used to be. Brianna wasn't a monster who arrived fully formed. She was a person who had been allowed, for 6 years, to operate without consequence. Kendall enabled it. I tolerated it. Lorraine saw it clearly and chose to handle it in her own way, quietly, with documents and intention rather than confrontation. She was smarter than all of us about that. There's something in that worth sitting with. Lorraine didn't rage. She didn't make accusations. She spent the last months of her life making sure that what she had built couldn't be taken by someone who hadn't earned it. She thought about Iris. She thought about me. She thought about what she wanted her life to mean after she was no longer here to defend it. That takes a kind of discipline I am still learning from. The thing about integrity is that it's cumulative. Lorraine had been building hers for 64 years, one choice at a time, and when it mattered most, it held. Brianna had been chipping away at hers the same way. One small compromise, one calculated smile, one column of numbers on a legal pad, and when the moment came, there was nothing underneath her. Just air. I think about Kendall. That one word he said. Don't. I've turned it over in my mind 100 times since that morning. It wasn't enough, and it wasn't too late, and it was exactly what he had. A man can spend years letting someone else make his decisions and still have something left in him that knows right from wrong. The question is whether he chooses to use it. Kendall chose, at the last possible moment, to use it. I don't know yet what he'll build from that. But I know what it cost him to say it, and I'm not going to pretend it cost nothing. What I want anyone watching this to take from it is simple. The people who try to take shortcuts through other people's losses always believe they are smarter than they are. They mistake silence for weakness. They mistake patience for confusion. They see a man grieving and think they see an opening. What they don't see is that some people grieve and plan at the same time. Some people have been watching longer than anyone knew. Lorraine left me a letter. She told me to plant yellow roses. I did. They're not open yet, but the roots are in the ground, and that's the part that determines everything else. You don't get to rush what grows after loss. You just make sure you put the right things in the soil. Take care of the people who actually show up. Build carefully, and never let anyone mistake your quiet for surrender.